Welcome to the St. Thomas Project, Devotions for Doubters, brought to you by the Alyosha Society, where we are pursuing truth and beauty and goodness through great literature. Yes, most of what we do here at the Alyosha Society is focused on works of literature. And for a detailed explanation of the focus of this series, the St. Thomas Project, I'd like to encourage you to check out the video, St. Thomas Project, Devotions for Doubters, #1, Preface. So I labeled it Preface. So I explain it all there. But in short, the St. Thomas Project, what I'm doing here is I'm addressing folks who wrestle with doubting their faith. One thing before I jump in here, you will see that I'll be wearing green in all of the videos in this series. It's the liturgical color for hope, common time. It often points to growth, and it is my hope that God will give you hope and grow your faith no matter where you are in your journey at this point. So in this video, this is the second video in this series, I want to share my personal testimony with you, my story. So here goes. In the movie, The Silence of the Lambs, one of my favorites, Clarice Starling has nightmares. You've seen the movie, right? She's having nightmares that remind her of a childhood incident. As a little girl, she was awakened by a haunting sound of lambs being slaughtered on a relative's farm in Montana. She confesses to Hannibal Lecter that she still wakes up in the middle of the night thinking that she hears the screaming of the lambs. Lecter believes that her efforts to save people as an FBI agent are actually motivated by her desperate desire to silence the screaming of the lambs, Clarice. If she can save someone else, then maybe the screaming will go away. When I was 17 years old, late one night, it was June 1987, after a long day of work, I sat down on my bed, seemingly out of nowhere. I heard an inner voice, a voice that I've been trying to silence for more than 3 decades. After growing up in a stable, loving Christian home, the thought first occurred to me, the only reason that I believe any of this is because I was raised in a Christian home. If I had been raised in another home, I very well might believe something else. In other words, I have no strong foundation for believing what I believe about God and eternal things. That day marked the beginning of a long, arduous process of working through my doubts about the faith. I use the term agnostic, but I'm not really sure what I was during that time. So having been raised, in a Christian home, I heard the gospel frequently. I responded to the preaching of the gospel when I was 8 years old, as is the practice in this particular church. After hearing a powerful Easter message about the love of Christ and his sacrifice for me and his triumphant resurrection, I walked the aisle, made a public profession of faith, and I was baptized the next week. I have no doubt that I understood God's grace, as an 8-year-old can, and that I became a part of the family of God. Everything seemed just fine until that fateful night in 1987. Now, I wish that were the only time I heard that inner voice causing me to doubt the claims of Scripture, but, through Bible college, seminary, 30 years of teaching and administration in Christian schools, and yes, even as an elder at my church, I still hear that inner voice. Sometimes it's loud and bold, other times it's subtle and faint, but it's still there. As a teacher, I have a genuine passion. I really do, a genuine compassion to communicate the gospel to my students, but I know that I'm at least partially motivated by my own deep-seated desire to silence the voice that I heard in June of 1987. If I can make sure that my students are prepared to handle the toughest challenges to the faith, then maybe I won't hear those challenging voices anymore. You know the story of the Apostle Paul. He prayed 3 times that God would take away his, thorn in the flesh. The most remarkable thing to me about that story is that he prayed only 3 times. I've begged God to remove that thorn daily for more than 30 years. I realize now that I need to settle in, and I need to resolve that it's for my own good for it to remain. And I'm fine with that. I've internalized a profound truth in this struggle that I absolutely cannot hang on to God. I must depend upon the fact that he is hanging on to me. That is what the gospel is. God has redeemed me. He has brought me into his family, and he keeps me. I don't have the ability to cling to him. He holds on to me. So in my marriage, God has humbled me and forced me to rest in him as a father and grandfather. I know some of you are thinking, wow, he does not look old enough to be as a father and a grandfather. God has forced me to rest in him. As a teacher, God has forced me to rest in him. Most recently, a series of very painful events in my life from 2014 on. I have to see them all as gifts of God, gifts that he uses to cause me to rest in him. Now, listen, friends, we all have voices that we're trying to silence. Maybe they're lambs, maybe they're voices of doubt, voices that tempt us to do and believe things that aren't consistent with the truth. I've learned that as much as we may wish for those voices to go away, they may remain. I confess, this series of devotional meditations was written really somewhat for selfish reasons. I wrote them as a part of my own wrestling with doubt and faith. I've decided, after much thought and prayer and discussion with my wife, to share them with you. I genuinely hope that they'll be a blessing to you as you work through your own unique set of struggles.